She cried in front of the police officer like she had just lost everything. And in a way, she had. She just did not know it yet, because I was standing quietly in the corner of my own living room, holding a printed log of every single door event from the past 10 days. Let me take you back to the beginning. I have known Carla for 11 years. 11 years of birthday dinners, of covering for each other at work, of splitting the check and never counting too carefully, of the kind of easy, comfortable trust that builds up so slowly you stop noticing it until the day it disappears and leaves a hole you can see through. She was not just a friend. She was the person I called when my father went into the hospital. She was the person who showed up at my door at 2 a.m. with a bottle of wine and no questions when my last relationship ended. I have a framed photo of us from a road trip we took 7 years ago. We are laughing in front of a gas station somewhere in the middle of nowhere, squinting into the sun, completely at ease with each other. I still have that photo. I was looking at it the morning all of this ended, and I was trying to find the version of her that existed in it. I am not sure I can. This story starts in early October. I had a work trip coming up. 2 weeks in Portugal, a project I had been building toward for almost 2 years, and I was genuinely excited. The only thing that made me nervous was my apartment. I live alone in a mid-sized place in the city, 3rd floor, decent neighborhood, but not a gated one. I have some things I care about. Not extravagant, but meaningful. A collection of vintage watches that belonged to my grandfather. A camera setup I had built piece by piece over 3 years. A small safe under the bed with documents and a bit of cash. Normal things for a person who has worked carefully and saved carefully. I needed someone to water the plants, collect the mail, and keep an eye on things. I asked Carla without hesitation. She had a key from years ago, one I had given her during a period when I was traveling frequently for work and needed someone I trusted. She said yes immediately, warmly, the way she always did everything. She hugged me at the airport and told me to relax and enjoy myself. She said she would send me photos of the plants to prove they were still alive. We both laughed. I landed in Lisbon on a Tuesday morning. The light there is different, softer and older somehow. I settled into the rental apartment, had a coffee at a small table outside, and felt, for the first time in months, genuinely calm. Carla texted me that evening. Everything fine. One plant looking a little sad, but she had watered it. A photo of my living room, neat and normal. I sent back a thumbs up and went to bed. The next few days were good. Work was going well. I was eating well. I was sleeping well. I texted Carla a few times and she replied with short, cheerful messages. Nothing unusual. On day 5, something small shifted. I have a smart lock on my front door. I installed it about 2 years ago, partly for convenience, and partly because I'm the kind of person who lies awake wondering if he locked the door, even when he knows he did. The lock keeps a log. Every entry, every exit, time-stamped to the second. I can check it from my phone. I do not check it obsessively, but I do check it occasionally, the way you might glance at your bank balance, not because you are worried, but because you like knowing. On day 5, I opened the app while waiting for a meeting to start. I was not looking for anything specific. I scrolled through the log out of habit. The door had been opened 4 times on the previous day. That was unusual. Carla was supposed to stop by every 2 or 3 days, not multiple times in one afternoon. I looked more carefully. The 4 entries were spread across about 3 hours. Entry at 1:14 p.m., exit at 1:47 p.m., entry at 2:09 p.m., exit at 3:52 p.m. I sat with that for a moment. I told myself there was probably a simple explanation. Maybe she had forgotten something and come back. Maybe she had brought a friend to help with the plants. Maybe she had needed to use the apartment for some reason and felt comfortable doing so. I did not text her about it right away. I noted it. 2 days later, I checked the log again. Another set of multiple entries the day before. 3 this time. And the exits were long, over an hour each. She was spending significant time in my apartment, multiple times a week, when she had told me she was just stopping by every couple of days. I still did not confront her. I am not the kind of person who fires off accusations from 1,000 miles away based on a door log. But I started paying closer attention. On day 9, I was scrolling through a second-hand marketplace app on my phone, the kind of app where people sell used electronics and furniture and miscellaneous items. I use it occasionally when I'm looking for something specific. I was not looking for anything specific that night. I was just scrolling, killing time before dinner. And then I stopped. There was a listing for a vintage Omega Seamaster in excellent condition. The seller had posted 3 photos. The watch was sitting on a white cloth, photographed from different angles. I recognized it before I consciously understood why I recognized it. The scratch on the edge of the bezel, the particular patina of the dial, The small nick on the crown, that was my grandfather's watch. I put my phone down on the table. I picked up my coffee. I put that down too. I sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I opened the listing again and looked at the seller's profile. The account was new, created 2 weeks earlier. No reviews, no other listings at the time. The username was a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to me. I screenshot everything. The listing, the photos, the seller profile, the timestamp. I saved them to a separate folder on my phone. I did not sleep well that night. The next morning I went back to the listing. It was still up. I thought about what else in my apartment might be gone. There was no way to know for certain from Portugal, but I had a sick, settling feeling in my stomach that I recognized as the feeling of understanding something you do not want to understand. I thought about calling Carla. I thought about it for a long time. I decided not to. If I called her and she knew I had seen the listing, she would pull it down and cover her tracks. If I stayed quiet, I kept the advantage. I am not a strategic person by nature. I am not someone who thinks in terms of moves and countermoves. But I knew, with a clarity that surprised me, that my only real leverage was the fact that she did not know what I knew. So I stayed quiet. I sent her a normal text that afternoon. "How are the plants?" She replied within minutes. "All good." I sent back a smiley face. I want to explain something about the days that followed, because they were some of the strangest days of my life. I was in one of the most beautiful cities I have ever visited, doing work I genuinely cared about, and underneath all of it, running constantly in the background like a program I could not close, was this quiet, steady grief. Not rage. Not yet. Just grief. The kind that comes from realizing that someone you loved was not who you thought they were, and trying to figure out when exactly that happened, and whether you missed signs you should have caught. I went back through years of memories the way you go back through old files looking for something specific. The birthday she had seemed distracted and left early. The time she had asked me casually how much my camera setup had cost, and I had told her more than I probably should have. The way she had always known exactly which of my things were valuable and which were just clutter. I had thought that was because she paid attention, because she cared. I understood now that attention and care are not the same thing. On day 12, I called my neighbour Marcus. Marcus is in his late 60s, retired, and has lived in the building for over 20 years. He's the kind of neighbour who notices things without being nosy about it. He had my number because we had exchanged them years ago for emergencies. I told him I was away for work and asked if he had seen anything unusual around my apartment. I kept it casual. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said yes, actually. He said he had seen a woman coming and going several times over the past week, sometimes with bags. He described Carla accurately without knowing her name. He said one afternoon he had seen her leaving with what looked like a large duffel bag, heavier on the way out than it had been on the way in. He said he had not thought much of it because I had mentioned before my trip that a friend would be checking in. I thanked him and asked him one more thing. I asked whether he had a doorbell camera or any kind of exterior camera that might have captured the hallway or building entrance. He said yes, he had installed one the previous year after a package theft incident in the building. He said it covered the hallway from his door to the stairwell, which meant it would have captured anyone entering or leaving my apartment. I asked him to please not delete any footage from the past 2 weeks. He said, in a tone that suggested he understood exactly what was happening, that he would not delete anything. I booked an earlier return flight that evening. I landed back home on day 14 instead of day 16. I did not tell Carla I was coming back early. I took a cab from the airport, let myself into the apartment with my key, and stood in the entrance for a moment, just looking. The apartment did not look ransacked. It looked, at first glance, almost normal. But I knew my own space. I knew where things lived. And as I walked through the rooms, the absences became visible while the way shapes appear in the dark once your eyes adjust. The watches were gone. Not all of them. She had left 2 of the less valuable ones, which I found almost more insulting than if she had taken everything. The camera body was gone, though she had left the lenses. The safe under the bed had been moved, though not opened, which meant she had tried and failed. The small decorative box on my bookshelf where I kept a collection of foreign coins from years of travel was empty. The coins were not worth much money, but they were worth a great deal to me, and I stood in front of that empty box for a long moment. I took photos of everything, every empty spot, every moved object, every surface where something had been and was no longer. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and did 3 things. First, I downloaded the complete smart lock history for the past 2 weeks, exported it as a PDF, and saved it with timestamps. Second, I went back to the second-hand marketplace and found 3 more listings that had been posted in the past week by the same account. A camera body matching my exact model. A set of vintage cufflinks I had not even noticed were missing. A small framed print that had been hanging in my hallway for 4 years. Third, I called Marcus and asked if I could come by and look at the camera footage with him. The footage was clear. The hallway camera had a good angle. I watched Carla enter my apartment on 7 separate occasions over 12 days. I watched her leave with bags on 4 of those occasions. I watched her, on one occasion, stand in the hallway for a moment before leaving, look directly at the camera, and then look away. She knew the camera was there. She had decided it did not matter. That told me something important about how she had been thinking about all of this. Marcus gave me a copy of the relevant footage on a USB drive. He did not ask me many questions. He just said quietly that he was sorry. That was enough. I went back to my apartment and sat at the kitchen table again. I made a list. Evidence column on the left, gaps column on the right. The evidence column was longer than I had expected. The gaps column was shorter. I called the police the next morning. The officer who came was professional and efficient. I walked him through the apartment, showed him the missing items, showed him the photos I had taken. He took notes. He asked if I had any idea who might have had access. I told him yes. I had a friend who had been house-sitting. I showed him the smart lock log. I showed him the marketplace listings. I showed him the camera footage on my laptop. He was quiet for a moment after watching the footage. Then he asked for Carla's contact information. I gave it to him. What happened next was something I had not fully anticipated, though I probably should have. Carla arrived at the police station 2 hours later. I know this because the officer called me afterwards to give me an update. He told me that Carla had come in and that she had been very upset. He used that word specifically. Upset. He said she had told them that she had arrived at my apartment on day 10 of my trip to find signs of a break-in. A window she believed had been forced. Items missing. She said she had been terrified and had not known what to do. She said she had not called the police immediately because she had not wanted to worry me while I was abroad. She said she had been trying to figure out the right way to tell me. She had not mentioned the multiple visits before day 10. She had not mentioned the marketplace listings. And then the officer told me she had started crying and said that she was shocked I was treating her like a suspect when she had only been trying to help me, and that she had always thought of me as a close friend, and that this whole situation was incredibly hurtful to her. I listened to all of this without saying anything for a moment. Then I said calmly that I would like to schedule a follow-up meeting at my apartment with the officer present, and that I had additional evidence I would like to share in that context. He agreed. The meeting was set for 2 days later. I used those 2 days carefully. I printed everything. The smart lock log, formatted clearly with dates and times. Screenshots of all the marketplace listings, with timestamps. The camera footage, copied to a second USB drive. A written timeline I had put together myself, matching door events to listing dates to footage timestamps. I organized it all into a folder, the kind with the clear plastic cover, the kind that looks like you mean it. I also made one more call. I called 2 people from our shared friend group, people who had been close to both of us for years. I did not tell them what had happened. I told them there was a situation involving Carla and my apartment, and that I would like them to be present for a conversation that was going to happen in my home. I told them it was important. They both said yes. The afternoon of the meeting arrived. My apartment was clean. I had made coffee. I had set out chairs. I had placed the folder on the kitchen table where everyone could see it. The officer arrived first. Then Marcus, who I had also invited because he had provided the footage, and I felt he deserved to see how this resolved. Then the 2 friends from our group, Daniel and Priya, who came in looking uncertain and a little concerned. Then Carla. She walked in, and the first thing she did was look at Daniel and Priya. Her expression did something complicated. Relief, I think, at seeing familiar faces. Or maybe it was calculation. She was wearing a soft grey sweater, and her hair was pulled back, and she looked, as she had always been good at looking, completely reasonable. Completely sympathetic, the kind of person you instinctively want to believe. She looked at me, and her expression shifted into something wounded, hurt. She said my name in a tone that implied I had already done something wrong by calling this meeting. I said, "Sit down, please." She sat. The officer went through the basics first. He explained that he was following up on a reported theft and that there were some questions about the timeline and circumstances. He said it calmly and professionally. Carla nodded and reached up to touch the back of her neck the way she always did when she was uncomfortable, a gesture I recognized from 11 years of knowing her. Then the officer looked at me and said I could share the additional evidence I had mentioned. I opened the folder. I started with the smart lock log. I placed it on the table and walked through it out loud. 7 entries over 12 days. Multiple visits per day on several occasions. The first visit on day 1 of my trip. The log showed clearly that she had been in the apartment regularly and extensively, not just on the day she claimed to have discovered a break-in. Carla said the log must be wrong. She said smart locks were not always accurate. I moved to the marketplace listings. I placed the screenshots on the table. My grandfather's watch, my camera body, the cufflinks, the print, each one with the seller profile, the timestamps, and the photos she had taken in my apartment. Photos where, if you looked carefully at the background, you could see details of my living room that confirmed exactly where they had been taken. Carla's face did something I had not seen it do before. It went very still. Priya made a small sound. I moved to the footage. I had set up my laptop on the table. I played the relevant clips. Carla entering. Carla leaving with bags. Carla looking directly at the hallway camera on her way out. Daniel said quietly, "What is this?" It was not really a question. Carla looked at the footage for a moment, then she looked away. Then she looked at Daniel and Priya with an expression I can only describe as a pivot. She said she could explain. She said things had been very difficult for her financially, and she had made some terrible decisions, and she was deeply ashamed, and she had never meant for any of this to happen. She said it in the voice of someone asking to be held rather than held accountable. Priya asked her directly, "Did you take his things?" Carla said it was more complicated than that. Priya asked again, "Did you take his things and then pretend there had been a break-in?" Carla did not answer. She looked at me instead, and what I saw in her face was not remorse. It was the look of someone recalculating, trying to find the angle that still worked, trying to figure out whether the sympathy play could still land if she leaned into it hard enough. It could not. The officer said he would need to continue this at the station and ask Carla to come with him. He was polite about it, professional. There was no drama in the way he said it, just the quiet, absolute weight of consequence. Carla stood up. She looked at me one more time. I do not know what she was looking for. Whatever it was, I did not give it to her. She left with the officer. The room was quiet for a moment after the door closed. Marcus picked up his coffee cup from the table, looked into it, and set it back down. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Daniel looked at me and said, "I had no idea." I said, "I know." Priya said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Since day 9 of the trip." She absorbed that. She said, "And you just came back and put all of this together?" I said yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am sorry this happened to you." I said thank you, and I meant it. In the weeks that followed, the picture became clearer, and also, in some ways, sadder. Carla had been in serious financial trouble. Not the kind that sneaks up on you overnight, but the kind that builds over years of small, bad decisions and then suddenly becomes impossible to manage. She had not told anyone. She had maintained carefully and consistently the appearance of someone who was fine. The nice clothes, the dinners out, the casual generosity that I now understood was partly funded by things she should not have had access to. She had taken items from my apartment on 4 separate visits before staging what she had hoped would look like a break-in. She had chosen the window in my second bedroom because it faced an alley and was less visible from the street. She had pushed it open from the inside and left it that way. She had planned to report it to me herself, tearfully, as something that had happened while she was there, positioning herself as a victim alongside me. What she had not accounted for was the smart lock. She had used the key I gave her, which meant there was no forced entry at the door. She had not known that the lock kept a log, or if she had known, she had not thought I would check it carefully enough. She had not known about Marcus's camera. She had not thought about the marketplace listings being traceable. She had not considered that the photos she took of the items, in my living room, with my furniture visible in the background, would become evidence. She had thought about my trust. She had relied on it. She had counted on the fact that I would want to believe her, that I would feel guilty for doubting her, that the history between us would create enough friction in my mind to slow me down. She had miscalculated. The formal process took several more weeks. Some of the items were recovered from the marketplace buyers who had purchased them in good faith and were cooperative when contacted. The watches came back. My grandfather's Seamaster came back. I held it in my hand the day it was returned, and I thought about him, about the road trips he used to take me on when I was a kid, about the way he wore that watch every day without thinking about it, the way valuable things become invisible when they are simply part of your life. Some items were not recovered. The coins were gone. A few smaller things. I accepted that. Carla did not go to prison. She received a suspended sentence, community service, and a repayment order. I was not in the courtroom for the hearing. I did not need to be there. The outcome was documented, and that was enough. What was harder to process than the legal outcome was the social one. Our friend group had been built over years, the kind of group where everyone knows everyone, and the relationships between people are layered and complicated. After that afternoon in my living room, things shifted. Not dramatically, not overnight, but they shifted. People who had been close to Carla pulled back, not because I asked them to. I did not ask anyone to do anything. But there is a particular kind of damage that comes from watching someone you trusted perform sympathy in front of you while knowing they are lying. And several people in that group had been in that room or had heard from those who were. The performance, once seen, could not be unseen. Carla had spent years building a reputation for warmth and loyalty. She had been, in many ways, the emotional centre of our group. The one who remembered birthdays, who organised dinners, who showed up when things were hard. Now people were looking back at all of that warmth and asking themselves what it had been built on. Whether it had always been a kind of currency. Whether the showing up had always been about accumulating goodwill rather than giving it. I do not know the answer to that. I'm not sure the answer is simple. People are rarely entirely one thing. What I do know is that the version of Carla who cried in front of the police officer and called me heartless for asking questions was not an aberration. It was a strategy. And once you have seen a person use grief as a strategy, you cannot unsee it. I took the framed photo of us from the road trip off my wall about a month after everything ended. I did not throw it away. I put it in a box in the closet, the same box where I keep things I'm not ready to decide about. Two people squinting into the sun at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, completely at ease with each other. I do not know if I will ever take it out again. I'm not sure it matters. What I have been thinking about more than anything in the months since is not Carla specifically. It is the structure of the trust I gave her. I gave it completely and without conditions, the way I'd always given trust to people I considered close. I had never thought of unconditional trust as a risk. I had thought of it as a virtue. I understand now that trust without structure is not generosity. It is exposure. There is a difference between trusting someone and giving them unlimited access to everything you have built, with no checks, no visibility, no way to notice if something goes wrong until it is too late. The first is a relationship. The second is a vulnerability you have dressed up as a relationship. I still trust people. That has not changed. I'm not interested in becoming the kind of person who treats everyone with suspicion, who keeps people at a careful distance, who never lets anyone close enough to matter. That is not a life I want, but I have learned to build structure into trust. To notice when access and intimacy are being conflated. To pay attention to small inconsistencies, not because I expect betrayal, but because attention is a form of care, including care for yourself. The smart lock was not surveillance. It was just a record. The record was neutral. What it revealed was not neutral at all. My apartment is different now. Not dramatically. I repainted the second bedroom a colour I had been thinking about for years. A deep, quiet green that I like very much. I reorganised the bookshelf. I bought a new plant to replace the one Carla had apparently been neglecting for most of the trip, while sending me photos of it looking fine. The watches are back in their case on the dresser. My grandfather's Seamaster is on my wrist right now as I write this. I've been wearing it more often than I used to. It feels like the right response to almost losing it. I gave the spare key to Marcus. He did not ask for it. I offered it. He took it without making a big deal of it, which is exactly the kind of person he is. I do not have a clean ending for this story. I do not have a moment of perfect resolution where everything makes sense and the grief wraps itself up neatly. What I have is a clearer picture of the difference between people who are present because they love you and people who are present because they have calculated that being present is useful. And I have, if I am being honest, a slightly better relationship with my own instincts. The feeling I had on day 5 when I saw those door entries, the stillness that came over me when I recognized the watch in the listing. I had those feelings, and I did not dismiss them. I followed them carefully and quietly until I knew what they were pointing at. That is not a small thing. The last text Carla ever sent me was sent the night before I came home early from Portugal. She had no idea I was already on the plane. She sent me a photo of my living room, tidy and normal, and wrote, "Everything is perfect. Don't worry." I still have that message. I have not deleted it. Everything is perfect. I look at it sometimes, not to feel angry, but to remember that the most convincing lies are the ones delivered with the most warmth. And that warmth, on its own, is not evidence of anything except warmth. The evidence is in the log. The evidence is in the footage. The evidence is in the watch case on the dresser that is now full again. And the evidence is in the fact that I am sitting here, in my repainted apartment, wearing my grandfather's Seamaster, with a spare key now held by someone who has earned it. That is enough. More than enough, actually. That is everything.